Okay, so now we're recording. So first of all, I want to say thank you for coming. This is a really important topic that I feel like people have not maybe talked about quite as much as we need to, or in the ways that we need to. And this topic certainly resonated because we had a lot of people who were very interested. So it's really great to see everybody here. And in case anybody is unaware, this is the Women Who Code Atlanta network. And so Women Who Code is a global organization that is focused on helping women accelerate their technical careers. And we have one of the oldest chapters here in Atlanta. So we've been around for quite some time, and we have a lot of regular events. When we went virtual, we kind of took a little pause while we thought, it'll be a month or two and we'll be back to in-person events. And once we realized that we weren't right in that, we started to do some virtual events. So we try to have a meetup, kind of an evening meetup that's a panel or a talk or something like that every month. And then we also have a virtual lunch that's usually the first Thursday of each month. And that's just a great time for people to get together and connect, because I think everybody's been struggling with that a little bit. And so I'm one of the directors for Women Who Code Atlanta. And I am also an engineering manager at a local to Atlanta company called CallRail. And I've been active with Women Who Code since about 2015. And also joining us is Erica Stanley, who is actually the founder of the Atlanta network. She's around somewhere. And she started the Atlanta network and has been kind of propelling it to being one of the most active groups in the world. So we're really excited to be partnering with 7Factor for this event. And I have to say that Amy, who spoke at one of our Women Who Code events, kind of wrote to me and said, hey, we have this idea. We kind of want to do this. What do you think? And that is how this happened. So thank you, Amy. And I want to invite Jeremy to talk a little bit about 7Factor.
Yeah, super quick. We're a software engineering as a services company here in Atlanta. One of our core competencies is diversity and inclusion being baked into the culture at the very beginning. So my wife is a structural engineer. There's so many things about supporting diversity and minorities in various technology jobs that we're extremely passionate about. And this was one of those things that when we were talking about it, we've always thought about Women Who Code and a few other groups in town that we're super excited to work with. And Amy and Alyssa deserve 100% of the credit for putting this together. I'm very excited to partner with y'all to do this. And I won't give you the commercial. We're a consulting firm. So if you need any engineering work done, give me a call. But we're very happy to have Crystal join this panel as well as one of our own engineers that works in the trenches for some of our largest customers. And we just want to thank Women Who Code for allowing us to partner with you all to put this event on.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate it. So just a reminder about what we're talking about. So how many people, and if people want to just use the chat and do, whatever, how many people have ever had an article or something on Twitter or something like that jump out on them about imposter syndrome and thought, oh, I need to go read this because I have imposter syndrome? A couple of people. Awesome. And how many people have ever been kind of disappointed with that article? Like it didn't really tell you anything that you thought you could really use. Yep. So we want to really get into the nuts and bolts of imposter syndrome and not the superficial, here are 5 things you can do tomorrow. So to help me with this topic, we have an amazing panel of people. And so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in the spirit of making sure that we hit on the really high notes. So we're going to start with Monique.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Monique Week. So I'm not going to read from the screen because I know who I am. You guys can feel free to read as you choose to, but I want to share a little bit about me. Originally from Queens, New York. I've been in Atlanta probably about 14 years now. I've been in healthcare IT for around 20 years plus. I spent the bulk of those 20 years with McKesson Corporation as an implementation and strategy leader. So I did a whole bunch of different things with McKesson, traveling throughout the US and Canada and Puerto Rico to implement electronic medical records. Shortly after that, I spent some time at ADP. And then most recently, I'm now at PT Solutions, which is a physical therapy practice, also nationwide. We have 250 clinics in 20 states. I do want to share that while I've been at PT Solutions for the last 2 months or so, prior to that, I was at Aveanna Healthcare. So that's actually when I partnered with Jeremy and 7 Factor Software. So at Aveanna Healthcare, I spent about 3 years there doing pediatric private duty nursing solutions. So I was helping to make sure that our nurses in the field throughout the U.S. again, so this is a theme, nationwide companies, but I helped to make sure our nurses had the technology they needed to do their job. So the main thing with that was mobile applications. That's where, again, Jeremy and the 7 Factor team came in and worked with Crystal. So I've been blessed to have a great career over the last 20 years, and I do want to share that imposter syndrome is real. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know a name for it. I didn't know I even had it at some point in my career, but I think most have. So I don't know how deep we want to go now through the introduction, but Beth, do you want me to talk a little bit about my personal experience with it, or are we going to get to that after?
Yeah, go right ahead. That's great, Monique.
Okay, no problem. So with that, I think the main thing with imposter syndrome, and again, only recently it's had a name for me, but for me, it's been more along the lines of what Jeremy mentioned earlier around diversity and inclusion. So a lot of times throughout my career, and even before I became a professional in my career, I was the only one in the room. So whether that meant the only woman, the only Black person, the youngest or the oldest, nowadays, maybe I'm in the middle. But, at some point, I was the only in the room. And when you're the only in a room of whatever it is, you start to feel like, well, do I want to speak up? Excuse me. 1 second. Do I want to speak up? Are they going to hear? Are they going to hear what I'm saying? I don't know why I'm choked up. But are they going to hear me? Do they understand me? Am I going to be accepted? That type of position. That's where you find yourself. And that's what imposter syndrome is. It's that lack of confidence. And maybe you know what you know, but are you going to be afraid to speak your mind because someone else might not understand what you're saying? So I think that's when it hit me. And when most recently, I spoke to one of my employees and they admitted that they felt that. And that's when I researched it a bit. And I realized that we all get to that point at some point. And again, we don't know a name for it. So, I think over the course of this discussion, we'll be able to share some other experiences. But the main thing to remember is you're not alone in that feeling. And the confidence that you have to show is not confidence that I know everything. It's confidence that I'm self-aware to know what I don't know and be willing to learn it. So that's what I've learned over the course of my 20 years. And I'm not afraid to say, hey, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, versus to feel like you have to be a know-it-all and know everything. So that's me. I look forward to answering any questions once we get to that point, but I'm so happy to be here and thank you for the invite.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Monique. And Marissa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really, really excited to be a part of this panel, as this is the first panel I've ever been a part of. So I'm just really grateful to be here with this esteemed group of ladies. So I've had a little bit different of a career path, you could say. First and foremost, I am a mom to a beautiful little medically fragile girl. And what that means is she was born with a rare disease called Nemeline rod myopathy. It's a muscle disease. It affects her muscles, specifically her breathing muscles. She requires the use of a trach ventilator, feeding tube, wheelchair. And although all that might sound sad, she is a spunky little girl, and she's definitely taught me quite a bit over the years. I've developed a lot of skills from her care, from working with doctors, from coordinating her care, coordinating her home health care, her nurses that come in and out of our home. And I've taken those skills and developed a bit of a training protocol for new medically fragile moms that are coming up. So years ago, I would work with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and the new moms there in the NICU, PICU, and TICU, and just teach them and kind of give them a bit of tips and tricks and a roadmap along the way on how to really like navigate this crazy world of being a medically fragile mom and what all that entails. So fast forward into 2018, I started working at an IT staffing firm. So Monique, to piggyback off of what you were saying in terms of imposter syndrome, I certainly felt that as I had been out of work for about 4 years. I did part-time work, but it was just a job. It wasn't necessarily a career with any sort of career progression to it. And getting back into the workforce, I had very, very little confidence in myself, other than the skills that I had developed with my daughter, but I didn't know how that was going to ever be transferable into a true career that actually had potential for myself. So all that to be said, I worked with an IT staffing firm, and that brought me to Aveanna Home Health Care. My daughter is actually a patient of Aveanna Home Health Care and has been since she came home from the hospital at 3 months old, or 3.5 months old. And I got to learn the business side of home health care, and it became a true passion and true drive, I guess you could say, driver for me to be able to be a part of it. And I saw where I could make a difference. So through that, I became really well entrenched, I guess you could say, with Aveanna, and eventually they offered me a job. I started with Aveanna back in December of last year, and they recently promoted me to patient experience application specialist. And what that means is my role focuses solely on any and all applications that directly positively affect patient experience within our pediatric home health care division. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Marissa. That's awesome. And it sounds like you've been navigating just a lot of things.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. And Nazeera?
Sure. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Jeremy, for hosting this panel discussion this evening. I'm thrilled to join all the others here. And my background, I used to practice medicine in India. And once I moved to US, I finished my master's in public health at UNC Chapel Hill, and I went back to India and I was implementing a few health prevention programs to prevent chronic diseases. And then I moved back to US, came to Atlanta almost 15 years ago, joined academics, was with Emory University for a few years before I moved to the government sector. And I was in the government sector, actually in our local Fulton County. So I was in the health department managing a division of health promotion. And from there, I was promoted to becoming the chief of staff at the chairman of the Board of Commissioners office. And from there, I left to become an entrepreneur and founded or co-founded Vendorship Inc. At Vendorship Inc., we help predominantly IT firms, technology firms, secure government contracts. And this came to be because of the gap that I noticed when I was in Fulton County, that many people or many firms or innovators and creative people were actually shying away from responding to government contracts or applying for government contracts. So that's when we found that need, and I am the CEO of Vendorship Inc. Apart from that, I also host monthly Chai and Just Chat sessions, which are sort of a community building, a bridge building dialogues and conversations along with Chai. It used to be in person, and this is our 4th year. And from last year, we've gone online every month on different topics where we try to build that differences and bring people together to unite. So talking about this imposter syndrome, frankly, I've been just coming across it for the past 2 or 3 months. I don't recall reading about it in my medical school, but however, as I started reading about it, and I said, oh my gosh, this happened to me 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, this happened to me in that job. So I'm starting to realize that, and how I could have prevented, or how someone helped me realize that that was what was happening. But at that time, we didn't have a name or a syndrome attached to it, right? So as you can see, I am an Asian and South Asian. And when I also ran for public office. So in a predominantly Caucasian city. And so I've felt the brunt of it, that I was not good enough sometimes. And being in the county government, we have the North Fulton and South Fulton. So I would always notice that I was the only brown, if I may, in the entire North Fulton group of team or meetings that I attended. And similarly, I would feel the same. I was the only one, the brown in the South Fulton meetings that I would meet with predominantly Blacks in the room. And so sometimes I felt that, am I being left out? And Monique, I understand, am I heard? Are they understanding my accent? And sometimes I've had people come and say, see, and I'm like, no, I'm not Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So different. But again, when I was on the 10th floor, so in Fulton County, if you're on the 10th floor, that's the highest of the political arena you can get to, where all the commissioner's office are. I was mostly the only Asian walking around in that floor. And though I had confidence, I felt that several times I was asking permissions to do things which I didn't need to ask permission, because I had the title and the talent to do what I was supposed to do. But I felt the brunt of it just might be looking different or speaking differently. I felt the brunt of it. I'm realizing it. Oh my gosh, this is what it was at that time. But now that I'm able to put the word syndrome to it, I don't want to attach with this name that it only happens to women. I think definitely it happens to men as well. And it sometimes, I don't want us to relate this to sometimes everyday happening. Like, but I'll just give you an example. This afternoon, you sent us, all the panelists, the email. And then now I'm like, you know what, maybe I missed the link. So I want to ask you, and I emailed and I asked, is this the same link that you're sending to all the others as well, or do panelists have a separate link? And I didn't hear back, you're busy. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, well, did I ask a stupid question? Maybe she already sent. So I'm looking all over my email. So these are like normal things, right? This is not an imposter syndrome, that you're not good enough, you've not checked enough. So I think we have to sort of delineate what it is and some of the normal things that happens in all our lives. So thank you.
I feel like we could do a whole panel on politics and imposter syndrome. That would be a whole topic in and of itself.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. And Crystal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal. I am a graduate from the Georgia Institute of Technology here in Atlanta, and I'm actually from Georgia itself. I'm from a little town in North Georgia called Blue Ridge. So I've definitely been able to feel the different effects of imposter syndrome growing up in a little country town where people weren't very technologically advanced, and being a girl who was interested in technology, I was very lucky to be able to go to Georgia Tech and learn more about computers and learn more about technology and start my career in IT. I've been working full-time since 2014, and I've worked at various different companies wearing all too many different hats. I've been in all parts of the development cycle. I've been from leading as a Scrum Master to just being a developer to actually being an instructor for programming at different points. And I've worked for small companies, big companies, just done a lot of contracting. And it's definitely really interesting and really fun to be in technology. I've never been one to kind of be afraid to speak out and speak my mind. Sure, definitely Jeremy and Monique know that. I am always asking questions and always making sure people know what's going on and who's working on what. And I definitely think that has helped me overcome imposter syndrome a lot, because I'm not afraid to ask questions. But I've definitely been in a lot of environments where the situations have arisen where I could have questioned myself. but I'm really lucky to be at a great company now and be able to work with and meet all of these great ladies. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Crystal. So I feel like we got to know a little bit about all of our panelists, which is awesome. And I think it's always helpful to be able to put a name. I realize everybody's name's up here, so this is probably gratuitous, but we're going to leave it up anyway. So these are the people we're talking to. So I think that we got a little sense of people kind of where they're coming from with imposter syndrome, but I wonder if people could share an example of a time in your career where you had imposter syndrome and kind of how you approached it. And if you knew then what you know now, what you might have done differently, or what how you always think of like the best response, like 3 hours later, what do you wish you would have done if you could have had foresight?
So I'll share something. So one thing I want to say, I didn't really talk as much about my current role as the Vice President of Technology for PT Solutions, but I think what I've noticed about me, and I think Crystal kind of mentioned, she's confident and she does think, and I don't think I was as confident earlier in my career. I think now the confidence has grown. So the example where I've actually had imposter syndrome, I had to think through it, was my career has spent most of the time in product implementation. So I was implementing after the fact. It's already been developed, et cetera. So when I came to Aveanna and worked with, Jeremy and the team, that was the development side, right? So it was like, I kind of felt some type of way. I'm not normally in the development cycle. Every time I've implemented a product, it was towards the latter portion of it when it was ready to go. I think where that comes in, you have to realize what value you bring to the table, even though you're in a room full of people that are doing something different than you. So you're with a developer, but they needed me to understand the end result of the product, how it's going to be implemented, what the end user experience is going to be. So I think the thing about imposter syndrome is to always try to think about what value you bring as opposed to the opposite, what value you don't bring. I think a lot of people, it's almost like the glass half full versus half empty. You can immediately focus on what you don't have as opposed to what you have. So I think that's where imposter syndrome comes in, because when you don't want to speak up, it's a question of, do I have the knowledge, et cetera, but not realizing you may have a different perspective that someone in the room needs to hear. So my experience was probably more so at this point, I feel very confident about what I bring to the table, and I'm confident enough to know, again, what questions I might have, and not worried about having to be the one that knows every single thing in order to answer a question.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Anybody else have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's the fact that I'm not a college graduate. I chose not to go to college years ago. I couldn't really justify for me having to, pay back all that loan and not know what I wanted to do with my career at 21 years old or 20 years old. So I actually started working. So my father at that time was like, well, you can go and you can find a job that has a salary and a 401k. That's going to be your choice. So that's what I've done. And I think I chose jobs that were not career based. I lacked confidence because I wasn't a college graduate. So I think going into interviews, not being able to, to really speak to check the box of did you graduate college or not, was a huge hindrance for me, and definitely did not help my confidence in the least bit. After I had my child is when I think everything kind of changed for me. And that's when I started leaning more on my skill set that I had developed, and less on the accolades or certifications or degrees that I didn't have.
Marissa, what do you think made you make that kind of flip in your mind of, I'm not so worried about like this degree or checking this box, but I know that I have these things, like I'm bringing these things. I'm going to use Monique's example. I'm bringing these things to the table.
I would say it was probably when I had to really have meaningful, impactful conversations with doctors. I had to make massive medical decisions at that time. And, I would go home, I would be at the hospital all day writing everything down that the doctors would tell me, all the verbiage that I had never heard of or thought I would ever hear in my entire life. And I would go home and I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours researching. It was almost like college. Certainly I'm not a doctor, don't profess to be, but I knew that when I would have a conversation with it, I knew when I guess got understood and maybe gained more confidence was when I could have a conversation with a doctor and I understood where that doctor was coming from and the doctor understood where I was coming from. So it was a really, I guess, respectfully direct conversation. And that's when I think I started gaining confidence in my skill set because I didn't have that past experience of completing college. And I didn't have this, amazing career either of entrepreneurship or anything like that. It was really, administrative assistant was really what I thought that I was going to be best at. And I could not have been more wrong. So I think really it was more along the lines of having that experience and just really leaning on those experiences and then looking back and going, hey, you did something really tough. Now you can do something even tougher.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Beth, for the question. I can go next. So I can relate to an example. At that time, I didn't know it could be related to be called as imposter syndrome. But I was here promoted to becoming the deputy chief of staff when I entered the chairman's office with the commissioners. And here I am, it's a new environment, it's a new challenge, and a very high profile. He's the chairman of the entire county, so representing him on meetings, and then here I am, a newbie on the block of the 10th floor. And I realized I know I had the talent, I had the confidence. That's why I was promoted to that position from being leading a division at the health department. But as I was doing activities or tasks that I was good at, I realized that I was asking for permission from the chief of staff, which even didn't need many times permission, like, am I doing this right? Even though I know I am doing it right, but I don't know why there was this need that I might not be good enough on the floor because all the others who are on the floor are almost might be there for 5 years and 10 years. And this is completely a new position for me, but I'm very confident that the task that I had to do, I just knew my roles and responsibilities pretty well. But sometimes what helps is when you get feedback from your supervisors or your leadership, right? So one time for lunch, the chief of staff then, we had lunch and he was saying, Nazeera, you're very good at doing everything. You are getting the deliverables, but it's just that you're asking permission for every small thing, which you don't need to. And that came as a shocker for me because I didn't realize I was doing that. And maybe that was a self-doubt. Even though I know I was going perfectly well, sometimes I was doing better than the chief of staff, but just not knowing that I can, even the success, I was not even celebrating those success, sometimes in self-doubt, and might be the success, I was attributing it to other factors and maybe not me solely helping with those tasks. So for him to give me that feedback really helped. That, and then I went back and I had to realize, oh my gosh, I asked him like 10 permissions this week, which I really didn't need to because I have the authority as the deputy chief of staff to do those. So it took me some time, and with his feedback, it really helped me that I didn't need to doubt myself and move ahead and make those calls and make those meetings happen. And so I wanted to mention that. But there's another incident that will always stay to me is when at the health department, when I was at the health department, I was responsible for pulling in coalitions for all the chronic diseases. And then after 3 years, we won a $9 million project from federal government, and a white male of almost 70 years old who became a very good friend along with that coalition leadership, who was leading the asthma coalition, came up to me and he said, hey, Nazeera, when 3 years ago you were tasked with this, with this activity or this building this coalition, this humongous task, I wondered, is this Asian petite lady actually going to accomplish what she's setting out to? So he said, I proved myself wrong. You have actually done very well, and you have changed my mindset. So that really helped me understand how his thought process was in the beginning. And I think some of us go through that. We get judged before even we start. Just because, like I said, culture plays a role in this imposter syndrome, even being judged, that we might not be able to do as well. We might not be able to connect with communities who don't look like us, even if we are in a leadership position. So I think it was not about proving him wrong. It was just what I did best at, and still continue to get feedback and not stop or continue to self-doubt.
That just reminds me of a few years ago, well, maybe more than a few, but there was a whole conversation that was kind of on Tech 404 and with the Rails Girls group, where people would talk about how if you're going to an interview to be a software engineer, you should wear jeans and a hoodie, because if you dress too nicely, like people didn't take you seriously. Or if you went to a meetup, people would think you were a recruiter, because they're obviously you couldn't be an engineer if you dressed nicely. And I just remember a couple of people like, we're going to wear skirts this month. Like do not define us. We will wear what we want to wear. And I mean, it's just it's a small thing, but I feel like it kind of represents that, like, you're not gonna judge me based on what clothes I choose to wear. So
definitely, yes, I agree. And actually, in my current role, I'm not from a tech background, but I'm helping all these technology companies, high-profile CEOs like Jeremy. And then, we can't self-doubt ourselves. Are we good enough to coach these CEOs on getting government contracts? So imposter syndrome might have played a role in each of our team members during this time, but we're starting to talk about it and correcting ourselves beforehand with that feedback.
that's really good. So Crystal, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what she was talking about, learning how to deal with being judged and kind of proving people wrong is really important. One of my first internships was actually working for JP Morgan Chase, a giant worldwide company. And I was actually working in one of the New York City offices for the architecture and automation team, which happened to be one of the teams that was only about 4 steps down the ladder from the CEO of the company. So there was a lot of pressure on my team and a lot of pressure on me to perform well. And I often got quizzed by a lot of people that were developers as well, a lot of them older male coworkers who were quizzing me to make sure I knew what I was doing. And of course, I was able to answer the questions because I knew what it was. But at first, it was really frustrating to me. And I really hated how people were constantly looking down on me, because I was very young, working in an office full of people who've been working as developers for 40 years, and I wasn't even out of college yet. And on top of that, I'm female presenting. So a lot of people were immediately judging me based on my appearance and based on my age. But I had supportive coworkers on my team, and my boss actually had a daughter around my age, and so he was able to give me some good advice and help me kind of stand up for myself and not feel like people were not feel like I was constantly being tested. It was just something I needed to stand up and prove myself for. And I just needed to keep having the confidence in myself, because I knew I could answer the questions and I knew I could perform. And by the end of my internship, I had actually made pretty good friends with a lot of the people who were quizzing me at the beginning. And I kind of proved myself and showed myself. And it was a really good experience to be able to kind of fight through that.
I really appreciate that. And it sounds, just thinking about what everybody shared, and there's elements to everybody's story that talk about how you had to overcome how people perceived you, or kind of the box people were putting you in. And I know we talk a lot, and I know everybody's seen all those like 5 easy ways to overcome imposter syndrome things. But how much of imposter syndrome isn't really about you? And I don't know how many people read the Harvard Business Review article that was in the meetup in the meetup link, but it was really, really good. And I'm gonna read one little piece from it. This phenomenon being researched and explored in the 1970s, but the majority of research fails to bring in environmental, racial, and cultural factors that play a role. Instead of thinking, how can women overcome this? We should be thinking, how can workplaces improve to not create these environments? And I would love to think about what could we do, or what could we ask to be done in workplaces and in, you know, other spaces that are social, where why is it always on the individual person to fix this? Why isn't it on the workplace? And what changes would help make that kind of a level playing field, instead of how much energy do you have to spend proving yourself over and over again until everybody accepts you, and how much time do you have to spend thinking about how to phrase things the perfect way, so you're hitting that balance of not asking for permission, but making it so that people's hackles don't get raised and things like that. How can we avoid that load? Because then we got to go do the work, right?
Yeah,
It's a really big question.
I would like to. It is a big question, and I thought about it quite a bit. When I would like to think that the current kind of times that we're in has allowed diversity and inclusion to be on the forefront. And I heard this quote one time, that diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. So really think about what that means. It's feeling included. It's feeling, so there's some companies that are only focused on diversity, and some are focused on the combined diversity and inclusion and equity. And I think we're at a point now where I think the culture of a company, I like the phrase fail forward. You feel like you're allowed to make a mistake, because there's some companies that don't allow that. So you do feel like you have to ask for permission, and you can't not know the answer, right? And so I think that's the first thing. And I also think it's the question of the leadership. I think we need to do more leadership training around unconscious bias. So a lot of what Nazeera said is that unconscious bias, and the person she spoke to had the courage to say what they were really thinking. The person, and it's the bias could be age, it could be race, it could be anything. So I think having better leadership training around that unconscious bias that you don't even know you have. I also think, I'm a fan. I'm a graduate of Florida A&M University, yay, Rattlers. I'm a fan of, historically Black colleges and universities that kind of allow people to feel like they're in a safe space. And it teaches them what it's going to look like once they, go out into the real world in some cases. For me, at Aveanna, I started a women in technology group. So I had a small amount of women that were able to come together. And what was really powerful is I had one person that was in the group that was there for 25 years. And she spoke her experience throughout. And then we had some people that were brand new to their career. So I think when you get people in those safe spaces and small groups, whether it be women or minorities or, whatever preferences you might choose, if you get them in that small group, in some cases, it allows for them to be in that safe space and realize that you're not alone in how you feel, and just validate some of those feelings so that they're not taking over their day-to-day activities. So that's my thought about just the work environment can really improve upon the culture and kind of expand on, is it safe here? That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to include that just having a work environment where you have such guidance, tremendous guidance. Like I can say at Aveanna, I have so much guidance, so much support, and not just from my coworkers, but from upper level management, and just knowing that that's there, I think changes. I guess maybe brings down that wall of imposter syndrome a little bit. I tend to have a pretty, I guess, good sense of humor, self-deprecating humor, and I tend to be quite an open person with communication. So I feel like if the environment lends itself to open communication, a great sense of humor, and working through problems together, and support and guidance from top down, I really do feel like that can help to mitigate the imposter syndrome that is pretty rampant through our community, or I guess IT specifically.
Thank you, Beth. Great question. I think Monique mentioned about leadership, which is very important in any environment, whether it's a small group team or in a big company. Leadership really, it needs to break the silence sometimes in getting people to get to know each other more further. And sometimes it's just lack of awareness, right? So each of us comes with a certain culture. Like I have this habit of nodding my head. And sometimes unless my colleague told me, so wait, are you saying yes or no? So, some of those teachings, and I had to figure out maybe I shouldn't do too much, and I became aware of myself. And it's just the culture habit we have, and I think it's called an Indian nod. And so for my colleague, she was a VP marketing at that time at the county government. She understood where I was coming from. So next time she knew when I was like saying yes, and I'm listening to her, I'm fully engrossed in listening to her. That's like, oh my gosh, go ahead, I'm listening to you. So, that happened. So again, sometimes understanding that culture, diversity training, definitely, I think I've heard a lot of good things about implicit bias training, and each of the companies having a good EEO policy, and how are they promoting training and understanding the diverse communities that they are within their team, and definitely matters. I can certainly cite an example. When I was also leading the asthma coalition or putting the coalitions together, I made sure that there was always 2 co-chairs instead of 1 co-chair of that entire leadership. So the same person who made that comment to me about Asian petite lady was a co-chair of the asthma coalition. And then we had this African-American pharmaceutical executive who was the other co-chair, and just the arguments that they each had about entitlements, who are you? So they would each come back to me and complain to me separately, but then I would send them back and I said, you guys are the most talented people I know in this whole world. You can do this. They would get back to it. Happened 3 times, 4 times. I didn't give up on them because I knew they were so talented and intelligent. They could create wonders for the community about asthma. They went back. A year later, they became so much like best friends, and they would actually argue with me. And so that was so good to see. So I think we have to create that environment where people already have come with this prejudged notion, and actually human beings are wonderful if you come to know them. So creating those opportunities, I could have given up on them and said, hey, it's not working out, let me change the co-chairs. I didn't give up on them. So I think some of that would really help in getting each other, and team building activities, and providing feedback. It's always good to get 360 degrees feedback from everyone, including your subordinates, your colleagues, supervisors, and that would help as well. So though there can be individual restrictions based on culture, like as an Indian, this was before me when I came for my master's here, I could just never look eye to eye on any, because it was lack of, for me, from my culture, it was lack of disrespect. How can you speak to someone who's older than you and look at their eye? So throughout my master's, I didn't even know when many professors thought I was lying, because I couldn't look up at them. I was told to always respect and put your head down when you speak to your elders. So that's a culture I had to learn after 2 years, that in the US, it was completely a different thing. So I don't know if does that fall under imposter syndrome? No, that's just my cultural thing that I learned. I was hard for me to call my professor's name by their first name. So I would always call yes, sir, yes, teacher, or, yes, professor, even though they would tell me to call them by their first names. It just didn't come out that easily because we are not taught like that throughout our childhood. So coming and learning and getting acculturated to the US culture also takes some time, and everybody just doesn't get it within 1 or 2 years. So just for consideration that there is some individual work that we all need to do, but as far if the environment that we are in, either the work culture or even within the family culture, is promoting to not cause these self-doubts, and how can you improve yourself first as well, helps a lot.
Yeah, I actually like what Amy just said in chat, psychological safety. I think that's a really good point, especially when it comes to people who are suffering from imposter syndrome, and just kind of for team cohesion itself, is your team needs to feel like they're in a safe space and like they're allowed to express their opinions. A lot of that has to do with how the leadership treats the team and looks at all of their employees, as well as how the team treats itself. I actually have an example from another time that I worked for JP Morgan Chase. I actually worked for a different sector of the company when I lived in Tampa, Florida. And my team was the team that everyone hated. We were the contractor team. So it was my boss, me, and 2 other people here in Tampa, and everyone else was contracted all over the rest of the world. So my other coworkers and I were actually assigned to kind of lead the contractor teams. And like I said, everyone was always looking down on the contractor teams because they were overseas, and, you know, contractors have their already bad bias of they just make spaghetti code and nothing ever works and they're just cheap. So I actually met with my team that I was in charge of. It was 12 guys who lived in Mumbai, and they were the nicest people ever. And we did a lot of team building activities and getting to know each other. And I connected them with my manager, who eventually started connecting with some of the upper managers. And it was really just a big communication issue that the guys didn't feel safe to be able to express their opinion because they already had this bias on it. But they felt a lot safer and more comfortable because someone else who was experiencing all these bias, some young girl right out of college at this big company, was helping them try to figure it out. So I think psychological safety is a big thing that definitely can help with imposter syndrome.
That's a great example. And I think that there's a lot of talking around psychological safety now, and what does that mean and how do you create it? And I know that it's a big thing that people are working on. We recently went through some leadership training talking about it, and it's interesting. One of the things that came up, Nazeera, because you mentioned the nod, which I do too. I think everybody does, especially virtually. And so the example that Lawrence brought to us was, so you have an employee who's talking to you and they're telling you that they feel like they're doing a really bad job and they're not sure they belong here, and you're nodding. And I was like, oh, that's horrible. That's so true. So I don't know what you do instead of it, but it was a very visceral response to, are you really creating that psychological safety by agreeing when they're saying something about how horrible they feel? And it's a really difficult thing, and how people really need to think and feel confident that you have their best interests and that you empathize with them and care about them in order to have those conversations. Speaking of psychological safety and hard conversations, if you as a leader in a capacity at an organization or at a company, if you see somebody who you kind of see the tell of imposter syndrome and the lack of confidence, do you feel like it's something that, assuming that you have a relationship and it's not this weird thing where you just drop in and say, hey, I noticed you, do you feel like you have a responsibility to kind of help somebody through this?
I will say yes. I don't know if I'm supposed to answer in order, but I'll just jump out there and say it. But I'll say yes, I do. As a leader, someone on my team, I do have a responsibility to try to at least talk through it. And I think because I'm a leader, but I'm a mentor first, you know what I mean? I think I consider myself a mentor to many, and it just happens naturally. It's not like I want to be your mentor. That's my personality. And I feel like one of the things that I've talked to individuals, I've had the conversation a couple times. I think the thing to remember is a shift to your individual mindset as well. So there's things that a company can do, a culture can do, but a person individually has to begin to think more objective about their own capabilities, because in some cases it can't be cured by the external forces. It can't be cured by the company. You can still go to a company that has a great culture, but if your own insecurities take over, you'll still be stuck. You'll still be trying to figure it out. And, you know, I mean, they can open up the doors and give you the keys to the kingdom to speak your mind, but you'll still have your own insecurities that won't let it out. So when I get to know the person, I think it's important for leaders to have one-on-ones. You know, that's like hands down one of the most important things you can do is get to know your team at a more, you know, not overly, but a more personal level. And in a case where you are trying to understand more about who the person is, and you can kind of tailor the conversation to that person. In group and team meetings, people are still not ready, even if it's a smaller group than a large session, they're still not ready to really be one-on-one and understand what's going on. So I do think as a leader, we do have a responsibility to our team if you especially want to be a growth leader, and that's even from the top down, you know, to create a culture. But from that culture, meeting with those individuals, it can't be broken. Like, it can't be like, I'm on my team, we're doing things where we're accepting you, but you see it at higher levels, it's not happening. It has to be a top-down thing, but you do need to understand who works on your team and play to their strengths or to their opportunities for improvement.
I know that's kind of a tough, unexpected question. I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts about responsibility as far as helping people if you think that they're suffering through imposter syndrome. Nazeera?
Yes, is Marissa, are you going next, or?
I thought Monique answered that beautifully. I have nothing else to contribute.
Sure. So thank you. So I want to take an example or two from my current position as the CEO of our company, Vendorship Inc. We have a very good team. It's women owned and women run. And I think, we correct each other without being judged or without feeling that or ridiculed. First of all, I don't allow them to call me a boss. So I say, hey, listen, we're just in a horizontal hierarchy. There's no superior boss or anything. I think you all have equal talents. We all have equal talents. But once or twice, I've had feedback from them as well that when I speak with clients, I've had the habit earlier that saying, hey, I'm not a businesswoman, but I'm into this, and so I've got the feedback from my team saying not to say that, right? Because I'm taking it in a negative connotation that then why are you in business if you're not a businesswoman? So I took that as a positive feedback, and I don't say that anymore. So yes, I am a businesswoman, and we are in business, and we want to help you. The second thing, how I've provided feedback is sometimes even today, a team member said, I don't know if I can respond to that. And my response was, of course, why do you think you cannot respond to that? You're much knowledgeable to respond to that question or the email. So I give them that empowerment that sometimes I feel we all need from each other. In fact, from the rule that I've put from April 1st is I'm not going to join any client calls. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking over the conversations, and I said that was not going to allow you to lead, or that is not going to allow you to be confident. So I said I'm going to step off slowly from client calls, and I want you all to take the lead because I know you all can do it. So every day, if anyone are saying, hey, I'm not a salesperson, I just can't do this, we all sort of hammer and say, no, of course you can do this. This is how it's done. So we're always, I feel, empowering each other. And I've really never noticed a negative situation. And every morning I wake up to see these team members at work, and I love coming to work. Of course, it's virtually though. So every morning there's a goal to achieve, and I'm achieving this goal along with these wonderful women. And each come with their sometimes we have our own challenges, family challenges, or other things going on, and we also call ourselves an extended family. So that has really helped us belong. Nobody's excluded. I can sense within a minute or an hour that something's going on with them. So I usually make a separate phone call and say, hey, is everything okay? I just noticed you didn't have your lipstick on today, or you didn't straighten your hair today, or you didn't have your scarf on today. Is everything okay? And just want you to know that if it's overwhelming, just take the day off or take the half day off, and we'll manage. So I think encouraging them, empowering as a leader really develops, and I can see how they have developed over the year, and I can see myself how I have evolved from who I was in managing this company along with this team. So I think both the sides encouraging and empowering each other and positively providing feedback. And in fact, I had a comment this morning, and a comment said from one of my team members, I really want to see this company at top. So if at sometimes if it's going to upset you with my feedback, then let it be. So that then I knew that, there are people who really care about what they do.
That sounds really awesome. Crystal, I don't want to skip you if you have some good things to add.
Yeah, sure. I definitely think encouraging others and giving good and honest feedback is definitely needed. There are some people who are just kind of anti-combative or a little shy by nature. So if they're suffering from imposter syndrome, it might feel like the weight of the world is on them, and just a little encouragement to help them try to be a little more confident, or maybe pairing with them or trying to help pass the word along to managers to get the information when the conversation started would be good. But definitely, I think we all need to be encouraging each other.
I think especially in the past year that we've had, and the continuing things that are happening, that making sure that we reach out and let people we know is really important to keeping those relationships really authentic, but also, personal, and letting people know that you're there. And I think is really, really important. I know that we could talk about this for a lot longer, but I want to get into kind of the advice that we have for people who are dealing with imposter syndrome. And sometimes you're in an environment that is a good environment, and you're not feeling any kind of negative way about it, but maybe you still feel very uncertain and questioning your ability and whether you belong there or not. And then sometimes you kind of get a sense that maybe the environment is kind of pushing in a certain way, or putting barriers in front of you, or weighing you down and making things a lot harder. And if you have advice as to both of those scenarios, I think that would be incredibly valuable.
Well, I want to say, first off, I can go all night on this topic because it really is dear and dear to my heart, but I'll try to keep it brief. This question, so first of all, I think it's a good combination of confidence and humility to help you overcome imposter syndrome. What does that mean? I'm confident in what I'm able to deliver, but I'm humble enough to know what I don't know yet, so I can ask for help, or I can, get a mentor, or whatever that looks like. I think for me, over the course of my career, I feel like there's been, whether it was a friendship that I had, I have a lot of strong women in my circle, whether it was a former boss or a current boss that was able to share with me some knowledge and give me some some honest feedback about areas that I can work on. I think that's the key. I think that's the key to trying to move forward past what might be perceived as imposter syndrome. And I do also think that as far as if you feel like you're in an environment where you can't succeed, whether it might be because the culture is not what it needs to be, you have to be okay moving on, right? So I think in some cases, a lot of people get to the point that they're like, I want to apply for another job, but I don't know if I'm good enough. And they might see a job that they're 70% of the way the job description looks like, I can do 70%. But again, back to what I said earlier, you're focused on the 30% that you can't do, as opposed to seeing it as, well, I can do 70%, and this 30% gives me room to grow and learn. Oh, and there's probably a bunch of stuff on this job description not listed that I can bring to the table. So again, not always focus on what you can do, but always can't do, but focus on what you can do, and what's above and beyond that job description in most cases is a wish list. So you can go above that. So I just think that, it's possible. I think the number one thing I want to share is, as a leader, it's our responsibility to have some transparency to our conversations, whether that be with our team members, whether that be with our peers, because that opens up the door for other people to say, here's where I have some gaps and I need to learn. I think we're at a point now where, a lot of people are so ready to kind of fake it until you make it, and they took that to a overkill. And they're not willing to say, I don't know this, And maybe you don't broadcast it to the world, but you have a trusted advisor. I like to say my board of directors that you kind of work with to figure out where you have gaps. So that's what I have for that.
I agree completely, Monique, specifically with the mentor. I feel that mentorship and just finding somebody that you really can lean heavily on helps you so much and can really help boost your confidence, whether that's someone that you are that you work for or work with at your current company or have worked with in the past. And you've just had that person in your corner. They believe wholeheartedly on you. And I really do think that that does help to bring down that barrier wall of, of lack of confidence that we tend to experience or can experience. I truly feel too, going back into how, the work environment can change. I think that does come down to, the interview itself. What is required from the get-go? Like, what are the job requirements, and how specific is that company in meeting, A through Z of that job requirement? If you find somebody, I used to work in IT staffing, and I would have really meaningful conversations with managers, and they would say, oh, well, they absolutely have to have a bachelor's degree. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But what if you found the perfect candidate that had everything else that you were looking for, fit in culturally with your company, which seems to be a really important factor these days, but doesn't have that bachelor's degree? Is that something that you're willing to sort of not focus so much on? And 9 times out of 10, they would say yes, and they would end up getting the candidate that they wanted. That's just one example. I do think that heavily metriced business or companies as a business model and that lack that autonomy for their employees. I do think that breeds lack of confidence, because you're focusing so much on the minutia and the granular things that really at the end of the day aren't, meaningful ways to move the needle, whether it's sales or, in other parts of business. But I do think that, focusing less on that, trusting the people that you hire, trust yourself as a manager, trust the people that you've hired, I think goes a long way. I don't know if anybody listens to Gary Vaynerchuk. He's kind of crude to listen to, but he really has some really great insight into, how to run a business, how to trust your employees. I always like to give the example of how Uber has a 5-star rating that every Uber driver starts off with. They start off with, the top of the line. And then as, time goes by, if they're not trustworthy, then that reflects in their Uber rating. And I feel like a lot of businesses should have that mentality.
Sure. Yes, definitely. I really liked what Monique and Marissa said so far. I think acknowledging, just like I realized just recently that this is something that existed and maybe I did face through. So first of all, knowing and acknowledging that, I might be facing through this, getting honest feedback from your team members. Yes, confidence helps, but also not beating yourself up to be a perfectionist or an expert all the time. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And it's very hard to fake it up that we know, right? So being honest with yourself and not beating up yourself to become that perfectionist, because mostly I think this imposter syndrome sneaks up on highly achieving people who are always looking for that perfection. It has to be looked over. I have to go into this training. I have to get this certification in order to do this the best. So taking easy steps to get there, and separate feelings from fact, and putting positivity, getting that feedback really would help. And also sort of visualize the success, right? So mostly if you see people who are having this imposter syndrome, in the past, I never celebrated small successes, and I'm like, why celebrate? And then I realized these small steps have to be celebrated with the team. And so that's just, and giving feedback, even in the team meetings. We have 3 team meetings per week. One of the team meetings is all about how did your week go? What was good at? What didn't you like? What do you hate? What did you hate doing this week? What did you feel you couldn't do this week? So, and all of us jump in and provide feedback. Then, no, of course you can do it. You are the best among here. So I think that has really helped. I think having confidence, but also not beating up yourself, but acknowledging that this is something that you can work on, and being with positive people who give you honest feedback would really help with addressing the syndrome.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's brought up some really good points. I think that doing some self-introspection would help a lot, knowing yourself and knowing more about yourself. There's all sorts of resources out there to help you learn more about your personality, your work ethic type, all of that information to help you become more confident in who you are as a person. And becoming confident will help you be able to know what you know and know what you don't. And it's okay to ask questions. I always tell people they should ask more questions, because there's no such thing as a dumb question. The worst somebody could say is no. And if it's a no, then you just move on and you learned, and now you know the answer to your question. You just got to always be looking for knowledge and trying to improve yourself. You shouldn't focus on the bad things, but take those bad things as learning experiences and figure out how to improve on the experience.
Thanks. That's very good advice. I was at a conference in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was the first time actually that I had gone and traveled to a conference where I was a speaker. So I was feeling some kind of way about being there. And one of the people gave a keynote address, and in it, he said, do you know the difference between a senior engineer and a junior engineer? And of course, nobody said anything like, oh, I do. And he said, well, the difference is the senior engineer asks questions. And so I think that goes exactly to your point, Crystal. And so we have somebody in the chat who asked a question that's kind of germane to that, which is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome when you're a new developer? So you don't really have a track record in the industry. You might have some projects that you use to get hired, but you're just starting out. And that is an especially vulnerable feeling time, right? Because you're just starting, and you have a bunch of people probably that you're working with that either expect you to produce some magical things, or that you're going to be working with, and you're coming in. And how do you kind of overcome that initial terror? I'm gonna look at you first, Crystal.
That's what I was thinking. Crystal's the developer.
Yes. So I honestly, just going to echo what I just said, is asking a lot of questions and trying to stay engaged. If you ask relevant questions to what is being talked about or what meetings you're on, and then that proves to other people that you're engaged and you're trying to participate and work on what you're working on. And even if it's just confirming something, you might feel that might be a little kind of imposter syndrome, asking just to make sure this is what you meant. Even just asking questions like that shows that you're engaged and that you were listening, and people will pay attention to that.
And I'm going to throw that question out in a little bit different way. If you have somebody who's new, especially who's a new engineer, or maybe is a new implementation specialist, or somebody who's brand spanking new, are there things that you can do to help this person overcome those initial feelings of imposter syndrome? And are there things that you would recommend to that person to ask for? Like, where are good places to ask for that support? Knowing that there's a core piece that's you, but can you throw out a lifeline?
Yeah, I think new people should always feel empowered to be able to talk to their managers or whoever their team lead is. Team leads should be there to be able to help the team. But if someone's still a little too nervous to ask directly, there's all sorts of really good resources out there, especially when it comes to programming. W3 Schools is one of my favorite resources to pass along to new people. And Stack Overflow has every question you could ever ask answered on it. And a lot of those people nowadays are really nice and really good at answering questions on there. So for tech questions, those are definitely some good resources.
Beth, I'd like to add, just like getting into a new environment, it could be challenging anywhere, right? So of course, someone just mentioned in the comments, feeling welcome. I think their onboarding process should be very detailed, and whoever the new person is or the manager, make sure that she or he knows whom to approach for what questions. Just checking on them almost morning or afternoon, how things are going, email or face-to-face or virtually. Hey, I'm just making sure, I'm just letting you know we are here. I'm just letting you know I'm here, or you can reach out to that other person if you have any questions. And I think just making them feeling welcoming and as a part of the team, allowing them to feel belonged and not left out, or creating self-doubt because it's a new job. I think anybody would have that normally the first few days or weeks, and then they gradually become a part of the team since they now know the environment. It's hard sometimes to understand within 1 or 2 days the culture. So you have to understand the culture of the company as well. And I would not say try to fit in, but definitely use your talents and skills to flourish and help with the organizational goals as well.
Hey, I can actually answer that from experience since I'm 2 months on my new job. So, both as a leader and as an individual contributor, when you join a new company, it can be a little bit stressful. Although I didn't feel that as much here at PT Solutions because I felt very welcome. So that speaks to the whole, what can a company do to, kind of eliminate what could be felt as imposter syndrome. But I do think it's the responsibility of the person to also kind of develop relationships, figure out who's who, have some one-on-ones with individuals, both at your level, above your level, or below your level if possible. And just really, try to think through. I think if as a new employee, or even when I joined PT Solutions and met with my team, I asked them each their strengths and their areas of opportunity. Like, where do they feel like they need help? And I think with that too, I didn't have the tools, but one tool that I've used in the past, I didn't try to get it here, was like Strength Finders 2.0. And, trying to allow them, because sometimes your strengths, sometimes you're not sure. You're not sure what you're good at, or you've had so much imposter syndrome, you don't know that you're good at anything. Like, some people just get to that point. I've dealt with some people that have, had job loss or had been looking for a while, and it's almost like I forgot what I'm good at. So I think for any new position, or if I have a new employee, it's the same kind of thought process. Kind of think about, do an inventory on what you're good at and what you need help in, and be willing to ask the right questions. So it ties back to what Crystal was saying. You have to be able to have that humility to say, I don't know that, but that's a good question. Let me think through it, and ask those questions and be open to answers. And I think every leader should have a certain amount of empathy. If you're not willing to put yourself in someone's shoes and not expect them to walk in day 2 and know everything, I think that's a sign of a good leader. You have to be empathetic with your team.
I completely agree. I'm going to offer up a lighter answer. I think humor can get us through so many things and can break down so many barriers. I think a good joke with with the new employees, goes quite far. I think just asking them about their lives, as Monique mentioned, getting to know them, not just in a business forum, but for business purposes, but just really getting to know that individual, what makes them tick, what makes them laugh, what makes them, what's their driver in life, and just having that deep understanding, I think goes a long way.
And Beth, I just want to add a quick note. We've also been celebrating our team's birthdays, so they always get surprise lunches or dinners, and they get to enjoy that with the family. And one of the nicest comment that I'm not going to forget was from one of our team members who said, Vendorship has made our whole family smile this afternoon on her birthday. So, those small things. And I've had, this is the first time my company is wishing my daughter a happy birthday. So last week we sang for one of the team members' daughter, happy birthday, all of us, and we recorded and sent it to her. So just being personal and, and of course an empathy as well, understanding what's going on in their lives helps.
that's really, really nice. And it's really special to bring those things into being virtual and it making those connections really solid and so forth. That sounds really, really nice. I just want to kind of summarize a couple of things a couple of the pieces of advice. And then I want to give everybody just like one more go around to see if there's anything to add, because I know we're coming up on the past time that I said we would end by. And I think that a lot of the things that were talked about are really understanding your value and understanding what you bring to the table and being solid in that. At the same time, having enough confidence to ask questions. So knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And one of the pieces of advice I've given people when they're starting, especially as new engineers, is a way to measure progress is if you're not asking the same question twice. So you asked a question, you got it answered. You're not asking that question again. You've moved on to your next question, kind of like your next bug. Like I fixed that one, now I got the next one. So that's progress, right? So that's a good measure to make sure that you're moving forward. We talked a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and that inclusion is really about being invited to dance, and that's something that companies should be doing in making sure that it's not just that people are there, but that they feel welcome, and that companies should be working really hard to create psychological safety and safe spaces for people, and that's a really important thing. We talked a little bit about how one way to help people feel safe at work is to create small groups of people who can get together in a safe place and get support and talk about things that they're struggling with and things like that. And that's a good kind of helping the organization develop psychological safety. So if you're working somewhere where you don't feel like it's as perfect as it could be, maybe that's a suggestion for making progress. We talked a lot about just that confidence and developing that confidence through your knowing what you're good at, and that there are tools out there to use, whether it's taking some assessments of strengths and personality. And we heard a couple of things like Strength Finders 2.0, which is actually really, it's really interesting because every time you change jobs, you kind of have to take it again. We talked about mentorship and finding somebody to be your kind of person that you can go to, who also will help you see things in a way so you understand your value and your worth, and maybe some ways that you could do things, but there would be somebody in your corner, and how important it is to have somebody in your corner. We talked about how people who have imposter syndrome are often highly achieving people, but we need to make sure that we don't push ourselves into that perfectionist place, because that's where things kind of break. And the idea that self-introspection is really important, and that as you know yourself, you develop more confidence, and that we also would look at something we would expect, especially as a new employee, is to have a manager or a team lead or somebody who is going to check in with you, ideally, especially now on a daily basis, to make sure that things are going well, you don't have any questions and things like that. Are there any, I think that was kind of a high level view. Are there any kind of things that we should add to that list?
I would say, Beth, be compassionate. I think, the empathetic sort of brings the compassion in you, and ultimately just be you. And, it's very hard when it's not being you, right? You are made for being you. So you have to sometimes finding the best place. So it's not going to be imposter syndrome after having imposter syndrome. Sometimes it might not be the right fit. The company's culture, you're just not the right fit, and might be the nature is telling you and challenging you, and find something that you're going to be passionate about, where you're going to flourish. So be you, and find the best place where you can be you without faking it. And the second thing is compassionate and humble with humility. I think Monique brought that up earlier. I'll remember, I just want to end, sort of close this from my part, as I was offered a proclamation from the county for the good work that I did, and I wore a sari and went. I just felt that was me, and the whole group over there was like, she's wearing a sari to this big event, and I felt, you know what, that's me, and on this day, let me be me, and I was comfortable under my skin. So sometimes you just have to be confident to be yourself. And if you feel there was any negative comments that you didn't like during team meetings, it's always okay to pick up the phone and talk to that person and say, hey, you sort of hurt my feelings there. And it resolves so many other issues. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nazeera, about, dressing like yourself and being you. I struggled with that when I first got into business after not working for all those years to care for my daughter. And I've always been maybe a little bit rougher around the edges with what I like to wear, and like Ann Taylor is not my thing. And yet I bought hundreds and hundreds of dollars of Ann Taylor. And, and I finally realized and now maybe not even realize, I think I finally gained that confidence with myself to just be like, you know what, just be yourself. If you need to wear a blazer, fine, but wear a Beach Boys t-shirt underneath it, because that's more you. So I completely agree with you. I also wanted to add that, I really feel like every experience that you go into, or every situation, maybe situation's a better word, every situation that you go into that's new in business, to really, when you might be lacking that confidence, to really draw on past experiences where you achieved something, where you completed something 100%, where you got those accolades, or where you just did a really, really great job. And it was a moment in time that you were proud of yourself. I tend to have that mentality, and maybe that word track in my head now is just like, okay, this is brand new for you. You don't know what you're doing, but you've done harder things before, or you're going to think about when you've done something really difficult and you did a great job, and you're going to do the same in this situation. I think that's where that maybe mentality or word track has helped me overcome new experiences.
Yeah, definitely looking back on things you've experienced and using them as learning tools for what you may or may not experience in the future. Just hang in there and know that you can do it, because you've made it up to this point so far. All of us have different backgrounds, and all of us have faced different challenges, and we've all overcome all those challenges, and we're all here. So just know that you can do it and have confidence in yourself.
That's great. I heard this expression that was nothing wasted, and the idea that anything that you've done is something that's added to who you are, and that really resonates.
Yeah, I'll share that one thing I've learned, and this is, as this is Women Who Code, this is Women in Technology. As a woman, we wear so many hats, whether it's a wife, a mom, an employee or employer, a leader, whatever you are. I think we all need to give ourselves some grace. So when you think about what grace is, that's just courteous goodwill. That's unmerited favor. Giving ourselves some grace allows for us to know that we can make mistakes and not dwell on them. And we give other people grace quite a bit, before we give ourselves grace. We'll point out every flaw that we have about ourselves, as opposed to looking at what we can do right. So I think that the big thing is to celebrate your wins and learn from your losses. So what I've done great. What I haven't done great, I've learned from, and now I'm on to the next. So I think we just can't stay stuck in what we haven't done as well as we should have. And that grace comes with motherhood. That grace comes with every aspect of our lives. And I think, I just heard this phrase called work-life integration as opposed to work-life balance, but trying to kind of integrate that and, get yourself a circle of friends that may not be in your field. I got a bunch of my girls, I see them out there. They're not in healthcare IT with me, but they check me, they teach me, they allow me to have grace. They push me a little bit further. So I think inside work and outside work, get yourself a strong circle and celebrate those wins and learn from the losses.
I can't imagine a better note to end on than grace. So I want to take a minute and thank our awesome panelists, Crystal, Nazeera, Marissa, and Monique, for just sharing your experience, your insight, and just really digging into this topic. I know that we could talk about it for another couple of hours, but this has been a really great conversation. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will wish everyone a good night. And as I said, this recording will be up in a couple of days. We'll share that information. And we welcome everybody to kind of come to the Women Who Code Slack, which is a great place where we have a lot of conversation. If you are interested in that, on our meetup page is all that information about connecting with us. And I hope that people will reach out. This slide deck will go up, and there's a link to all the panelists LinkedIn. So if you want to request a link and things like that and stay connected, that would be awesome.
Great.
So
Thank you.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Have
Bye-bye.
a great night.
Good night.